My name is Maxwell Harrison, 24 years old, and fresh out of law school. What my family never realized was that my legal education would become their worst nightmare. My grandparents raised me when my parents were too busy chasing money, and I made sure their $3 million estate would be protected from the vultures circling overhead. When my parents showed up with those smug grins thinking they had stolen everything, they had no idea what was waiting in that folder. Before I tell you how I outplayed my own family, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button for more stories about protecting what matters most. Growing up, I rarely saw my parents in the same room together, unless they were discussing business. My father, Richard Harrison, worked 60-hour weeks at his investment firm, while my mother, Diana, traveled constantly as a pharmaceutical sales executive. They lived in the same house, but existed in completely different worlds. Their careers always came first, family second, if we were lucky. By the time I was 7, I spent more weekends at my grandparents' estate than I did at home. Grandpa Robert and Grandma Eleanor never minded. In fact, they seemed delighted to have me. Their sprawling colonial home sat on 5 acres of beautifully maintained gardens, with a pond where Grandpa taught me to fish. The house itself wasn't ostentatious, but it was valuable because of its location and the land it sat on. Over the years, as property values in our area skyrocketed, that modest family home had become worth nearly $3 million. Money doesn't make the man, Maxwell Grandpa would tell me while we worked in his vegetable garden. What you do for others, that makes the man. My grandparents had built their wealth quietly through decades of smart investments and hard work. Grandpa started as a factory worker, and eventually saved enough to buy the factory when the owner wanted to retire. He turned it into a successful manufacturing business before selling it for a substantial profit. Despite their wealth, they lived modestly and focused on giving back to their community. My sister Rebecca was 4 years older than me and cut from the same cloth as our parents. While I spent weekends fishing with Grandpa or baking with Grandma, Rebecca was shopping at the mall with friends or asking our parents for money for the latest fashion trends. She visited our grandparents only when she wanted something. "Maxwell, come look at this," Grandma called one Saturday afternoon when I was 12. I found her in the kitchen, smiling at a bird feeder outside the window where cardinals were gathering. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life are absolutely free. These simple moments formed the foundation of my character. While my parents taught me about stock portfolios and networking, my grandparents taught me about integrity, compassion, and finding joy in simple pleasures. By the time I reached high school, I noticed the way my parents looked at my grandparents' property during family gatherings. They would discuss renovation ideas or comment on property values in the area, all within earshot of my grandparents. "This place would fetch a pretty penny if you ever wanted to downsize," my father once said to Grandpa during Thanksgiving dinner. "We are quite comfortable right where we are," Richard Grandpa replied firmly. Rebecca graduated high school and went to business school following in our parents' footsteps. Meanwhile, I found myself drawn to law, particularly areas that protected vulnerable people. I never told my parents, but part of me chose this path because I worried about my grandparents. The way my family eyed their property made me uneasy. When I was 17, I overheard my mother on the phone with a real estate agent. "Yes, just a preliminary assessment," she was saying. "The owners aren't selling yet, but we want to be prepared when the time comes." I knew exactly which property she was discussing. That night, I called my grandparents just to check in. Grandma mentioned that my parents had visited earlier that day and brought up the idea of them moving to a retirement community for their safety. "Your grandmother and I have no intention of leaving our home," Grandpa assured me. "This is where we want to spend our remaining years." That conversation cemented my decision to study law. I needed to understand how to protect the people who had protected me all my life. My parents' fixation on my grandparents' estate only intensified over the years. They began showing up at Sunday dinners more frequently, something they'd rarely done when I was younger. Rebecca suddenly remembered to send birthday and holiday cards. The sudden attention felt calculated and insincere. I graduated high school with honors and received a scholarship to a prestigious university. My grandparents beamed with pride at my graduation. My parents attended but spent most of the ceremony checking their phones for work emails. "We are so proud of you," Maxwell, Grandma said, hugging me tightly after the ceremony. "You are going to change the world for the better. I just know it." Little did I know how soon I would need to put that faith to the test. College opened my eyes to new possibilities and perspectives, but my connection to my grandparents remained my anchor. While other students spent their weekends partying, I often made the 3-hour drive home to visit Grandpa and Grandma. I helped Grandpa with yard work and listened to Grandma's stories about her youth. These visits kept me grounded and reminded me of what truly mattered in life. When I was accepted to law school, my grandparents were ecstatic. They had always believed in education as the key to making a positive impact in the world. My parents, on the other hand, seemed more interested in the potential income of a law career than in any good I might do. Corporate law is where the money is, my father advised during one of our rare phone calls. You could join the firm that handles our business affairs. But I had different plans. I was drawn to elder law and estate planning. The more I learned about how vulnerable seniors could be to financial exploitation, often by their own family members, the more certain I became of my path. During my second year of law school, I noticed a troubling pattern. My parents and Rebecca began visiting my grandparents more frequently, but always when they knew I wouldn't be there. Grandma mentioned these visits during our weekly phone calls. "Your mother brought over some paperwork for us to look at," she said one evening. "Something about updating our will. She says it's important for tax purposes." A chill ran down my spine. "Did you sign anything, Grandma?" "No, dear. Your grandfather said we should talk to our own lawyer first." Your mother seemed upset about that. During my next visit home, I noticed Grandma seemed more forgetful than usual. She would start a story, then lose her train of thought. Grandpa confided that she had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia. The doctors said the progression would be slow but inevitable. "We have not told your parents yet," Grandpa said quietly. "I worry about how they might react." I understood his concern all too well. That summer, I interned at a law firm specializing in elder law. I learned about the various ways that seniors could be manipulated or coerced into giving away their assets. I saw cases where children had convinced their aging parents to sign over properties, empty bank accounts, or change their wills. The parallels to my own family situation were impossible to ignore. During a holiday gathering that winter, I walked into my grandparents' study to find my father rifling through a drawer in Grandpa's desk. "What are you doing?" I asked, standing in the doorway. He barely flinched. "Just looking for a pen, son. Your mother needs to write down a recipe from your grandmother." But I had spotted the corner of what looked like a financial statement in his hand. When I mentioned the incident to Grandpa later, he sighed heavily. "Your father has been asking a lot of questions about our finances lately. He seems very concerned about our retirement planning." "And what have you told him?" I asked carefully. "As little as possible," Grandpa replied with a wink. "Some things are better kept between us." During my final year of law school, Grandma's condition worsened more rapidly than expected. She began confusing names and faces. Sometimes she didn't recognize Rebecca or my parents, though she always knew me. This seemed to frustrate my sister and parents immensely. "She's obviously not competent to manage her affairs anymore," my mother said sharply during one family dinner. "Dad, you need to consider power of attorney arrangements." "I am perfectly capable of handling our affairs," Grandpa replied firmly. "And Eleanor has good days and bad days. On her good days, she is still very much involved in our decisions." I caught Rebecca and my mother exchanging glances. Something about that look sent warning signals through my mind. During a private moment, I asked Grandpa about their financial arrangements. "Do you have a solid estate plan in place? Is everything documented the way you want it?" Grandpa hesitated. "We have a will drawn up years ago, but with your grandmother's condition, I worry it might not be enough." "Would you like me to help you find a good estate attorney?" I offered. "Someone who specializes in situations like yours." "I would trust you over anyone else, Maxwell," he said, placing his hand on my shoulder. "You have always had our best interests at heart." The next day, I caught my sister in Grandma's bedroom, going through her jewelry box. "Just admiring Grandma's collection," Rebecca said smoothly when she noticed me. "She said I could have her pearls someday." "Did she tell you that today?" I asked pointedly. Rebecca's silence was answer enough. That evening, I called Professor James Morgan, my favorite instructor from my trust and estates class. I explained the situation without using names. It sounds like your grandparents would benefit from a revocable living trust, he suggested. It would give them protection during their lifetime while allowing them to maintain control of their assets. And if one becomes incapacitated, the other, or a designated trustee, can step in without court involvement. And what if someone tried to manipulate them into changing the trust, I asked. That's the beauty of it. You can build in protections against undue influence. And if your grandmother's cognitive decline is documented, you could establish that any changes after a certain date might be suspect. It was exactly what I needed to hear. I spent the next week researching trusts and protections for vulnerable seniors. By the time I returned to law school, I had a plan. As graduation approached, I focused my studies on trust law and elder protection. I took every relevant elective and spent hours in the library researching beyond our required readings. Professor Morgan noticed my dedication and took me under his wing, offering additional insights from his 20 years of practice in estate planning. The law is powerful, Maxwell, he told me during one of our mentoring sessions. But it only works if you implement it before there is a problem. Once elder abuse or undue influence has occurred, it becomes much harder to undo the damage. His words reinforced my determination to act quickly. During spring break of my final semester, I drove home with a purpose. I needed to have an honest conversation with my grandparents about protecting their estate. I found Grandpa in his garden tending to the early spring plantings. Despite being in his 70s, he still moved with purpose and strength. Grandma sat nearby on a bench watching him with a soft smile. On that day, her eyes were clear and present. I would like to talk to you both about something important, I said, sitting beside Grandma. It is about your estate and making sure your wishes are honored. Grandpa put down his trowel and joined us on the bench. We are listening, Maxwell. I explained what I had learned about revocable living trusts and how they could protect their assets while giving them complete control during their lifetimes. I outlined how the trust could specify exactly how they wanted their estate distributed after they were gone. Most importantly, I continued, it would protect you from anyone who might try to take advantage of you, especially as Grandma's condition progresses. A shadow crossed Grandpa's face. You are worried about your parents. It wasn't a question. I nodded slowly. I have noticed things, he admitted. Phone calls that stop when I enter the room. Questions about our finances that feel too probing. Your mother suggested recently that I sign over the house to her name for tax purposes. My heart sank. They were moving faster than I had realized. Did you sign anything? I asked, trying to keep the panic from my voice. No, Grandpa assured me. I may be old, but I am not foolish. I told her I would think about it. Grandma reached for my hand. In a moment of perfect clarity, she said, "We want you to help us, Maxwell. We trust you." Those words both honored and terrified me. The responsibility was enormous. I am not yet a lawyer, I reminded them. But I know someone who is excellent at this type of planning. Professor Morgan has agreed to help us if you are comfortable with that. They exchanged a look that communicated decades of understanding. Let's do it, Grandpa decided. But let's keep this between us for now. Over the next 3 days, we worked with Professor Morgan, via video conference, to design a trust that would protect my grandparents' wishes. The estate would be placed in a revocable living trust with my grandparents as the primary trustees. I would be named a successor trustee if they became unable to manage their affairs. Most importantly, the trust included specific provisions against coercion and undue influence. We should document Grandma's current cognitive state, Professor Morgan advised. That way, if anyone contests the trust later claiming she wasn't competent, we have medical evidence from the time of signing. We arranged for Grandma to be evaluated by a geriatric specialist who documented her condition. While she had clear memory issues, the doctor confirmed that she still had periods of lucidity and was capable of understanding the basic concept of the trust with proper explanation. The final documents were prepared within a week. Professor Morgan flew in personally to oversee the signing, bringing along a notary and witnesses who had no connection to our family. I want this to be airtight, he explained. No one should be able to challenge its validity. On the day of signing, Grandma was having one of her good days. She listened attentively as Professor Morgan explained each document in simple terms, When asked if she understood, she nodded firmly. "This keeps our home safe," she said clearly, "for us to live in until we are gone. Then Maxwell will make sure it helps others, as we have discussed." We had indeed discussed their wishes for the estate. They wanted the bulk of it to fund educational opportunities for underprivileged youth, with a small portion set aside to make sure I was taken care of. They specified that my parents and Rebecca would receive token inheritances, but nothing close to what they clearly expected. "Are you sure about this?" I asked them privately before the signing. "They are your daughter and granddaughter." Grandpa's expression was resolute. "We have watched how they treat you, how they treat us, and most importantly, how they treat others, with nothing to offer them. We have made our decision." As Grandma signed her name with a slightly shaky hand, I saw relief wash over her face. Grandpa signed next, his penmanship still strong and confident. Professor Morgan collected the documents and arranged for them to be properly filed. "It is done," he announced. "Your wishes are now legally protected." That night I stayed up late talking with Grandpa on the back porch. The spring air was cool but pleasant as we rocked in the old wooden chairs that had been there since my childhood. "I never wanted it to come to this," he confessed. "Protecting ourselves from our own family. But you have given us peace of mind, Maxwell. For that we cannot thank you enough." "I only did what anyone who loves you would do," I replied. He shook his head. "No, son. That is not true. What you did takes courage and integrity. Not everyone possesses those qualities, even within the same family." As we sat in comfortable silence watching fireflies begin to appear in the garden, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenges were still to come. My law school graduation ceremony fell on a perfect May morning. The campus quad was decorated with the university colors, and excitement filled the air as hundreds of soon-to-be lawyers adjusted their caps and gowns. I scanned the crowd quickly, spotting my grandparents in their designated seats. Grandpa wore his best suit, and Grandma was elegant in a powder blue dress I remembered from countless special occasions. My parents and Rebecca arrived just minutes before the ceremony began, rushing to find their seats. My mother was checking her watch repeatedly, probably calculating how soon she could leave for her next appointment. When my name was called, I crossed the stage to receive my diploma. I heard Grandpa's distinct whistle and Grandma's delighted applause. My parents offered polite clapping, while Rebecca seemed absorbed in her phone. After the ceremony, we gathered for the obligatory family photos. "Smile like we are one big happy family," my mother directed, sliding her arm around Grandma's shoulders with practiced ease. "We are so proud of you, Maxwell," my father announced loudly for the benefit of passing faculty members. His hand gripped my shoulder firmly for the photo, then immediately dropped away. "Law school is expensive," Rebecca commented as we walked to the restaurant for our celebration lunch. "I hope it pays off for you." "Some things are worth more than money," I replied evenly. The meal was a tense affair. My parents dominated the conversation with stories about their latest business successes. Rebecca chimed in with updates about her recent promotion. Grandma grew quiet and confused by the loud restaurant environment, and I noticed Grandpa protectively holding her hand beneath the table. "So what are your plans now, son?" my father asked, between bites of overpriced steak. "Any firm showing interest? Corporate law can be very lucrative." "Actually," I said carefully, "I have accepted a position with Westfield and Associates. They specialize in elder law and estate planning." My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "That seems like a waste of your education. Those small practice areas hardly pay what you deserve." "I will be quite comfortable," I assured her. "And the work matters to me." Speaking of elder care, my mother pivoted smoothly, addressing my grandparents. "Have you given any more thought to that retirement community we discussed, the one with the full medical staff?" Grandpa shook his head firmly. "We are staying in our home, Diana. We have everything arranged just how we want it." An awkward silence fell over the table, broken only when the waiter arrived with dessert menus. Later that afternoon, after my parents and sister had departed for their respective homes, I sat with my grandparents in their hotel room. The moment I had been waiting for had arrived. "Are you still certain about transferring everything into the trust?" I asked them. Grandpa nodded without hesitation. "More certain than ever after today." From my briefcase, I removed the final documents that would complete the transfer of all their assets into the trust we had created. Professor Morgan had prepared everything. All that remained were the signatures. Once this is done, I explained the house, the investments, everything will be protected according to your wishes. No one can force you to leave your home, and no one can pressure you into changing the terms without going through significant legal hurdles. Grandma reached for the pen first. I want to sign while I am having a clear day, she said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. With those signatures, $3 million worth of assets, including the family estate, transferred into the irrevocable trust with me as the successor trustee. The primary beneficiary would be the educational foundation we had discussed, with specific provisions for my grandparents' care for the remainder of their lives. It feels like a weight has been lifted, Grandpa said, his voice thick with emotion. I helped them pack the next morning and drove them home. As we turned onto the long driveway leading to their house, Grandma reached forward from the back seat and squeezed my shoulder. "You will stay close, won't you?" she asked. Actually, I said I was hoping to move into the guest house for a while. The law firm I am joining is only 20 minutes from here. The relief on their faces confirmed I had made the right decision. Over the next few months, I settled into my new routine. Working at Westfield and Associates during the day, spending evenings with my grandparents. I helped Grandpa with household maintenance and sat with Grandma during her increasingly frequent confused episodes. My parents called occasionally, their interest in my grandparents' affairs barely concealed beneath superficial inquiries about their health. "The property taxes must be such a burden for them," my mother commented during one call. "They really should consider downsizing." "They are managing just fine," I assured her, not mentioning that the trust now handled all those details. Rebecca visited once, pointedly admiring various antiques and artwork throughout the house. "Grandma promised me this china cabinet years ago," she claimed, running her hand along the cherry wood. "I have the perfect spot for it in my dining room." Grandma, who was having a foggy day, simply looked confused. I smoothly changed the subject. 6 months after graduation, Grandpa suffered a massive heart attack while working in his beloved garden. Despite the emergency responders' best efforts, he passed away at the hospital with Grandma and me at his side. His last words were for her, "Remember, Eleanor, everything is taken care of. Maxwell knows what to do." The funeral brought the entire family together again. My parents took charge of the arrangements, presenting themselves as the grieving daughter and son-in-law to the community. Rebecca sobbed dramatically for the benefit of onlookers, though I had never seen her shed a tear in private. Throughout the service, I noticed my parents whispering to each other, occasionally glancing at Grandma with calculating expressions. After the guests had departed, my mother approached Grandma with an arm around her shoulders. "Mother, you cannot possibly stay in that big house all alone," she said firmly. "You will come live with us, and we will take care of everything." Before Grandma could respond, I intervened. "Actually, I am still living in the guest house. Grandma will not be alone." The look my mother gave me was cold enough to freeze water. "You have your career to focus on, Maxwell. We can handle this." "I think Grandma should decide where she wants to be," I said calmly. Grandma, despite her grief and confusion, was clear on this point. "I want to stay in my home," she stated firmly, "with Maxwell nearby." My father cleared his throat. "Diana, we should discuss the practical matters of the estate with the family lawyer. There will be paperwork to file. I have already taken care of those details," I informed them. "Everything is proceeding according to Grandpa's wishes." My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "We will need to review all the documents, of course," my father said smoothly. "As Eleanor's closest family, we have a responsibility to ensure everything is properly managed." "Of course," I agreed, revealing nothing. As they drove away, I knew the real battle was just beginning. After Grandpa's funeral, Grandma's condition deteriorated rapidly. Grief accelerated her cognitive decline, and she began having more bad days than good ones. Following our previously discussed plan, I moved from the guest house into the main house to provide round-the-clock care, hiring a part-time nurse to assist when I was at work. My parents increased their visits, always arriving unannounced. Each time they brought up the same suggestions. "Mother, this house is too much for you to maintain," my mother would say. "We have found a lovely assisted living facility. just 10 minutes from our home. Or my father would try Eleanor. The property taxes here are outrageous. Selling now while the market is strong makes the most financial sense. Grandma would become agitated after these visits, often repeating, Robert said we stay home. Robert said Maxwell would handle everything. One afternoon I came home early from work to find my mother and a strange man in Grandma's sitting room. Papers were spread across the coffee table, and my mother was holding Grandma's hand, guiding it toward the documents. What is going on here? I demanded from the doorway. My mother startled. Maxwell, you are home early. This is just Mr. Peterson, a financial advisor helping us organize your grandmother's affairs. I stepped closer and recognized the paperwork immediately. Power of attorney forms. Mr. Peterson, I said firmly, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. My grandmother is not signing any documents today. Young man, he began in a condescending tone, your mother has asked me to help with some standard estate planning. I am a lawyer specializing in elder law, I informed him coldly. There is nothing standard about attempting to have someone with documented dementia sign legal documents without proper representation. Now please leave before I report this incident to the Bar Association. The man gathered his papers hastily and made his exit. My mother's face flushed with anger. How dare you embarrass me like that, she hissed once we were alone. I am only trying to help Mother with her affairs. By having her sign away her rights, I challenged. We both know what you were doing. You have always been difficult, Maxwell, she snapped. So self-righteous, just like your grandfather. This family has financial considerations that you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I replied. And so did Grandpa. The confrontation ended with my mother storming out, but I knew it was far from over. That evening, I documented the incident in detail and sent the information to Professor Morgan, who was now serving as the trust's legal advisor. They're getting desperate, he commented when we spoke by phone. That's good and bad news. Good because it means they haven't found a legal way around the trust yet. Bad because desperate people often take desperate actions. A week later, Rebecca showed up alone, presenting a softer approach. She brought Grandma's favorite pastries and old photo albums, seemingly just there for a pleasant visit. But as the afternoon progressed, her agenda became clear. Grandma, she said sweetly while showing her a picture, remember when you said I could have your pearl necklace and the matching earrings? I was thinking it might be safer if I took them home with me today. So many break-ins these days. Grandma looked confused. Did I say that, dear? I cannot recall. Of course you did, Rebecca assured her. Last Christmas, don't you remember? I intervened gently. Grandma, would you like some tea? Rebecca, could you help me in the kitchen? Once we were alone, I confronted my sister. Stop trying to manipulate her. She's vulnerable right now. Rebecca's sweet facade dropped instantly. Oh, please get off your high horse. We all know you're doing exactly the same thing. Positioning yourself to take everything. I'm protecting her and honoring Grandpa's wishes, I countered. She laughed bitterly. Right. The golden grandchild, so noble and selfless. Mom and Dad see right through you, you know. Is that why they sent you the soft touch approach? Something flashed in her eyes. They didn't send me. I'm not their errand girl. Could have fooled me, I replied. Funny how you never visited Grandma until there was something to gain. She left without the pearls, slamming the door behind her. The incidents continued over the following months. My father showed up with a real estate appraiser claiming it was just to update the insurance. My mother brought various friends who turned out to be elder care placement specialists or attorneys specializing in guardianship proceedings. Each time I thwarted their efforts, carefully documenting every attempt. Professor Morgan advised me to install security cameras, which proved invaluable when my parents used their old house key to enter while I was at work and Grandma was resting. The footage showed them searching through Grandpa's office, rifling through drawers and filing cabinets. When confronted, they claimed they were looking for important family documents. Your grandfather borrowed some of our paperwork years ago, my father insisted. We need it back. The situation reached a new level when I discovered they had contacted Grandma's doctor, attempting to have her declared incompetent. Fortunately, her geriatric specialist was ethical and immediately informed me of their inquiries. Your mother asked very specific questions about your grandmother's capacity to make financial decisions, the doctor told me. She seemed disappointed when I explained that having dementia doesn't automatically render someone incapable of making all decisions. Throughout this difficult period, I maintained my focus on Grandma's care and comfort. Despite her increasing confusion, she still had moments of clarity, especially in the early mornings. During these precious windows, we would sit together on the porch just as she had done with Grandpa for decades. "They keep coming around asking about the house," she said one morning, surprising me with her lucidity. "But Robert fixed it, didn't he? With the papers we signed." "Yes, Grandma," I assured her. "Everything is protected just as you and Grandpa wanted." She patted my hand. "Good boy. You were always the one who understood what matters." As winter turned to spring, Grandma's health began to fail. The doctor warned me that she likely had only months left. I took a leave of absence from work to be with her full-time, hiring additional nursing help for the more difficult aspects of her care. My parents' visits became less frequent as they realized their efforts were being consistently blocked. But I knew they hadn't given up. The occasional calls to check on Grandma's condition felt like vultures circling, waiting. On a peaceful evening in early summer, Grandma passed away in her sleep just as she had wished in her own home with me nearby. Despite our complicated family dynamics, I immediately called my parents and sister with the news. They arrived the next day, appropriately somber in public, but privately already discussing funeral arrangements and, more tellingly, the estate. "We'll need to list the property right away," I overheard my father saying to my mother when they thought I wasn't within earshot. "The market is hot right now." "First things first," my mother replied. "We need to locate the will and any other paperwork. Maxwell must have them somewhere." I said nothing, allowing them to believe what they wanted. The funeral was arranged more modest than they would have preferred, but exactly as Grandma had requested in her written instructions. Throughout the service, I noticed my parents networking with community members, playing the role of grieving family perfectly. After the last guests departed from the reception, my father cornered me in Grandpa's study. "Now that the funeral is behind us, we need to discuss practical matters," he began. "Your mother and I will be handling the estate, of course. You've done enough taking care of your grandmother these past months." "That's thoughtful," I replied neutrally, "but everything has already been arranged." He frowned. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means Grandpa and Grandma made their wishes clear, and I've been following their instructions." My father's expression darkened. "Maxwell, you may be a lawyer now, but you're still young. Estate matters are complicated. Your mother and I have experience with these things." "I'm aware of how estates work," I assured him. "In fact, it's my specialty." He studied me for a long moment, seeming to reassess the situation. "We'll need to see all the paperwork, of course. As Eleanor's next of kin, your mother has certain legal rights." I simply nodded, not committing to anything. That evening, after my parents and sister had gone to their hotel, I called Professor Morgan to update him. "They're planning something," I told him. "I can feel it." "Let them make their move," he advised. "We're prepared for whatever they try." A week after Grandma's funeral, I was sorting through some of her personal items when I heard cars pulling into the driveway. Looking out the window, I saw my parents and Rebecca stepping out of my father's luxury sedan, their expressions triumphant. The confrontation I had been preparing for since law school was finally here. The doorbell rang with an insistent buzz that seemed to announce the confidence of its ringers. I took a deep breath, centered myself, and walked calmly to the front door. Through the decorative glass panels, I could see the distorted outlines of my parents and sister standing on the porch, practically buzzing with excitement. I opened the door, keeping my expression neutral. "This is a surprise. I wasn't expecting you today." My father stood front and center, his expensive suit and perfectly knotted tie projecting the authority he had wielded in boardrooms for decades. My mother flanked his right side, her smile tight and victorious. Rebecca completed the tableau on his left, practically bouncing on her designer heels. "Maxwell," my father announced, not bothering with pleasantries, "we need to talk about the house and your living arrangements." I stepped back, allowing them to enter the foyer. "Would you like to sit down? I can make coffee." "That won't be necessary," my mother replied sharply. "This won't take long." I led them to the living room anyway, gesturing toward the comfortable seating area where my grandparents had entertained guests for over 40 years. They remained standing, clearly too excited to bother with social niceties. "We have some news," my father began, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of someone who believes they hold all the cards. "We've been in contact with your grandparents' attorney." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "It seems," my mother continued, "that your grandfather had an older will that was never properly revoked. Our attorney has confirmed its validity." Rebecca jumped in, unable to contain herself. "The house and everything in it legally belongs to Mom now. Grandpa left everything to his children." My father pulled a folded document from his inner suit pocket and held it up triumphantly. "We have the paperwork right here. The property has been transferred to your mother's name. It's all completely legal and binding." My mother's smile turned predatory. "We understand this might come as a shock to you, Maxwell. You've been living here for quite some time, but we've decided to sell the property and we'll need you to vacate by Friday." Rebecca actually laughed. 3 days should be plenty of time to pack up your things." They stood there, a united front of smug satisfaction, clearly expecting me to crumble under the weight of their announcement. Instead, I felt a strange calm wash over me, the kind that comes from being meticulously prepared. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You're claiming that you've had the house signed over to your name, and you want me out by Friday." "That's right," my father confirmed. "It's nothing personal, just business. The real estate market is excellent right now, and this property is worth a substantial sum." I allowed myself a small smile. "And you really think I'd let that happen?" Their confident expressions faltered, slightly unprepared for my calm response. "Maxwell," my mother said, her voice hardening, "this isn't up for discussion. We have the legal documentation. The property is now in my name." "I see," I replied. "And when exactly did Grandpa sign this document you're holding?" My father glanced at the paper. "March 15th, 3 years ago." I nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting. And you're just acting on this now?" "We wanted to respect your grandparents while they were alive," my mother claimed, the lie flowing easily from her lips. "But now that they're gone, it's time to settle the estate properly." Of course, I agreed, my tone neutral. "And when did you file this paperwork with the county recorder's office?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed my father's face. "Last week." "Why does that matter?" "No reason," I said lightly. "I'll be sure to look for it in the public record." Rebecca stepped forward impatiently. "Enough games, Maxwell. The house is Mom's now. You need to start packing." I maintained my composed demeanor. "I understand you believe that, but I think you might have missed some important information." "What information?" my father demanded, his confidence beginning to crack. "I suppose you'll find out soon enough," I replied cryptically. "I assume you'll be back on Friday to confirm I vacated the premises." They exchanged confused glances, clearly thrown by my lack of resistance. "We'll have movers here at 9 in the morning," my mother stated firmly. "Be ready." "I'll be here," I assured them, "and I'll have everything prepared." As they turned to leave, my father paused at the doorway. "Maxwell, don't make this difficult. You're outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Accept it gracefully. End of chapter. End of chapter." I looked him directly in the eyes. I learned a lot from Grandpa over the years. One of the most important lessons was to always be prepared for rainy days. Friday will be very interesting. After they left, I immediately called Professor Morgan. "They made their move," I told him. "They're claiming they found an old will and have already transferred the property into my mother's name." He chuckled. "Sounds like they forged a document and filed it without proper validation. The county recorder's office sometimes processes paperwork without thoroughly checking its validity if it appears legitimate on its face." "They want me out by Friday," I continued. "They're bringing movers at 9 in the morning." "Perfect," Professor Morgan replied. "I'll clear my calendar. This is going to be quite the show." For the next 2 days, I went about my business, calmly making necessary preparations. I gathered all the trust documentation, including the medical evaluations of Grandma's competency at the time of signing and the video recording of the trust execution that Professor Morgan had wisely arranged. I also collected the security camera footage, showing my parents' unauthorized entries to the house and their attempts to have Grandma sign documents without proper representation. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. Friday morning arrived bright and clear. I was up early, dressed in one of my best suits, the trust documents organized neatly in a leather portfolio on the entryway table. At precisely 8:45, Professor Morgan's car pulled into the driveway. He stepped out looking every bit the distinguished attorney in his tailored suit and carrying his well-worn leather briefcase. "Ready for this?" he asked as I welcomed him inside. "More than ready," I assured him. At 9 o'clock sharp, the procession arrived. First came my parents' car, followed by a large moving truck. My father, mother, and Rebecca emerged from the car, dressed as if coming to claim their prize. Behind them, two confused-looking movers waited by their truck for instructions. I stepped onto the porch, Professor Morgan at my side, the leather portfolio tucked under my arm. The shock on my family's faces at seeing me standing there with an unknown ally was priceless. "Maxwell." My father began, his voice carrying across the front yard. "I see you're still here. I thought we made it clear that you needed to vacate the premises today." "Good morning to you too," I replied pleasantly. "I'd like to introduce Professor James Morgan, attorney at law and specialist in trust and estate litigation. He's also the legal counsel for the Harrison Family Trust." The "what my mother demanded" her perfectly maintained composure beginning to crack. Professor Morgan stepped forward. "Mrs. Harrison. Mr. Harrison, I'm afraid there's been a significant misunderstanding. This property, along with all other assets belonging to Robert and Eleanor Harrison, was transferred into an irrevocable trust 3 years ago, shortly after Maxwell's law school graduation." My father's face reddened. "That's impossible. We have documentation showing the property was left to Diana." "Ah, yes," Professor Morgan replied, opening his briefcase and extracting a folder about that documentation. "I took the liberty of obtaining a copy from the county recorder's office. The document you filed appears to have several problems, not the least of which is that the signature purporting to be Robert Harrison's does not match his verified signature on multiple legal documents filed over the past decade." Rebecca stepped forward aggressively. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything," Professor Morgan stated calmly. "I'm explicitly stating that the document you filed is fraudulent. Furthermore, even if it were legitimate, which it is not, it would have no legal effect. You cannot transfer property that has already been placed in a trust through a subsequently filed deed or will." I opened the portfolio I was holding and removed the trust certification. "This property has been held in trust since May 15th, 3 years ago. The trustees were my grandparents during their lifetime with me, as the successor trustee upon their passing. The trust is now irrevocable." My mother's face had gone pale. "This is absurd. We never heard anything about a trust." "That was by design," I explained. "Grandpa and Grandma were well aware of your intentions regarding their estate. They created this trust specifically to ensure their wishes would be honored." "And what exactly were their wishes?" my father demanded, his voice now dangerously low. "The majority of the estate will fund an educational foundation for underprivileged students," I explained. "The house will be sold, but not to finance your retirements or Rebecca's shopping habits. The proceeds will go to the foundation." Rebecca lunged forward suddenly. "You manipulated them. They would never have cut us out if you hadn't poisoned them against us." Professor Morgan intervened smoothly. "That's a serious accusation, young lady. Fortunately, we anticipated such claims. The trust execution was videotaped in its entirety with independent witnesses present. Both Robert and Eleanor Harrison were evaluated by medical professionals who confirmed their competency at the time of signing. All proper legal protocols were followed meticulously. My father, ever the strategist, was already shifting to damage control. "Maxwell, surely we can discuss this reasonably. Whatever they left you personally, we can come to an arrangement that benefits everyone." "They left me exactly what they wanted me to have," I replied firmly. "A modest sum to continue my education and career in elder law. The rest goes to helping others, which is exactly what they would have wanted. This isn't over, my mother hissed. We'll contest this trust. We have rights as their heirs. Professor Morgan smiled thinly. You're welcome to try, Mrs. Harrison. However, I should inform you that the trust includes a no contest clause. Any beneficiary who challenges the trust automatically forfeits whatever bequest was made to them. Bequest, Rebecca asked, suddenly interested. So we do get something. Each of you was left $10,000, I informed them. If you sign the acceptance forms without contest. My father scoffed. $10,000? From a $3 million estate, this is outrageous. Actually, Professor Morgan interjected, it's quite generous considering the documented attempts to manipulate Eleanor Harrison into signing over assets while she was cognitively impaired. We have substantial evidence that could be of interest to the district attorney's office if you choose to pursue this matter. The color drained from my father's face as the implications sank in. Fraud charges. Potential criminal penalties. Furthermore, I added the security system documented multiple unauthorized entries to this house while Grandma was alive. There's footage of you searching through financial documents and attempting to have her sign paperwork without proper legal representation. My mother's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled completely. You set us up. You've been planning this all along. No, I corrected her. I protected my grandparents from being exploited. There's a difference. The movers who had been witnessing this entire exchange with increasing discomfort approached my father hesitantly. Sir, should we start loading? Or... My father waved them off angrily. Go. Just go. We're not moving anything today. As the moving truck pulled away, the three of them stood there, defeated and exposed. I suggest you take some time to consider your options, Professor Morgan advised them. The acceptance forms for your bequests are available whenever you're ready to sign them. Contesting the trust would be expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately futile given the documentation we have. My father, ever practical when faced with a losing battle, was the first to recover his composure. Come, Diana, Rebecca. We're leaving. As they turned to go, I called after them. For what it's worth, this isn't what I wanted either. All Grandpa and Grandma ever wanted was to be valued for who they were, not what they had. My mother paused briefly but didn't turn around. Without another word, they got into their car and drove away. Professor Morgan placed a hand on my shoulder. You did well, Maxwell. Your grandparents would be proud. As I watched my family's car disappear down the long driveway, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness that it had come to this. But I also felt the certainty that I had honored my grandparents' wishes and protected their legacy from those who saw it only as a payday. The battle was over, but the work of carrying out their vision was just beginning. The weeks following the confrontation were surprisingly quiet. No legal challenges materialized. No angry phone calls disrupted my evenings. My parents and Rebecca seemed to have vanished from my life as completely as if they had never existed. The silence was both a relief and a strange new wound to navigate. Professor Morgan helped me begin the process of establishing the Harrison Educational Foundation, the primary beneficiary of my grandparents' estate. We drafted mission statements filed for nonprofit status and created the framework for a scholarship program that would help disadvantaged students pursue higher education. Your grandfather would have loved this, Professor Morgan commented, as we reviewed the first draft of the foundation's bylaws, creating opportunity from what he built. Both of them would have, I agreed, remembering how Grandma had always tutored neighborhood children at the kitchen table, refusing any payment beyond the occasional plate of homemade cookies. The house felt emptier without my grandparents, but I found comfort in the memories that filled every room. I continued living there during the transition, knowing I would eventually need to sell it to fund the foundation. But first, there was work to be done. One sunny Saturday morning, as I was sorting through Grandpa's workshop, deciding which tools to keep and which to donate, a car pulled into the driveway. Through the dusty window, I recognized Rebecca stepping out alone and looking uncharacteristically subdued. I met her at the front door, unsure what to expect. "Can we talk?" she asked, her usual confidence nowhere in evidence. I hesitated, then nodded, leading her to the kitchen where we had spent countless family dinners over the years. I offered coffee, which she accepted with a simple thank you. We sat across from each other at the familiar oak table, the silence stretching between us until she finally spoke. I was angry for a long time after that day, she began. Furious, actually. At you, at Grandpa and Grandma, at the whole situation. I remained silent, giving her space to continue. Mom and Dad are still angry, she admitted. They talk about it constantly, about how you manipulated Grandpa and Grandma, about how unfair it all is. And what do you think? I asked quietly. She stared into her coffee cup as if the answer might be found there. I think. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About the kind of person I've become. About why Grandpa and Grandma made the choice they did. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I wasn't a good granddaughter, was I? The simple honesty of the question caught me off guard. You were who you were taught to be, I replied carefully. That's generous of you, she said with a bitter laugh. But we both know I only came around when I wanted something. I barely knew them, not really. I nodded, not denying what we both knew was true. The thing is, she continued, after everything happened, I started remembering things. Like how Grandma would always make those special Christmas cookies I loved, even though her arthritis made it painful to roll the dough. Or how Grandpa taught me to ride a bike when Dad was too busy. Her voice cracked slightly. They were always there for us, weren't they? And I just took it for granted. They loved you, I said simply. That never changed. Rebecca wiped at a tear. I found out what the foundation does. The scholarships for kids who couldn't otherwise afford college. It's actually really beautiful. It's who they were, I replied. They believed in education and opportunity for everyone. She nodded, then reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I came to give you this. It's the acceptance form for the bequest. I signed it. I took the envelope, surprised. Mom and Dad. Still refusing, she said with a shrug. They say accepting would be admitting defeat. But I'm tired of the anger. And honestly, I don't deserve even what they left me, but I'm grateful for it. What will you do with it? I asked. A small smile crossed her face. I'm going back to school, actually, to get my teaching credential. I've been volunteering at an after-school program. And it turns out I really like working with kids. The surprise must have shown on my face because she laughed, a genuine sound I hadn't heard from her in years. I know, shocking, right, Rebecca? The materialistic princess wants to be a teacher. Mom and Dad are horrified, of course. I think it's great, I told her sincerely. Grandma was a teacher before she married Grandpa. Did you know that? No, she said softly. I didn't know that. There's so much I didn't know about them. We talked for hours that day, sharing memories and rediscovering each other as adults rather than rivals. When she finally left, we hugged awkwardly but genuinely. I can't undo the past, she said at the door. But I'd like us to be part of each other's futures, if that's possible. I'd like that too, I told her, and I meant it. That conversation with Rebecca marked a turning point. The anger and resentment I had carried began to transform into something more productive. I channeled my energy into establishing the foundation and continuing my work in elder law. 6 months after our confrontation on the porch, I sold my grandparents' home to a young family with 3 children. The husband was a teacher, and the wife, a nurse. Exactly the kind of hard-working people my grandparents would have approved of. The sale price, combined with the other assets in the trust, gave the foundation a substantial endowment of nearly $3 million. With the help of Professor Morgan, who had become both mentor and friend, I converted part of the property into a community center before the sale, with a separate entrance and parking area. The Harrison Community Center would offer free legal clinics for seniors, educational programs, and a meeting place for community groups. At the center's opening ceremony, I was arranging refreshments when a woman approached the table. She was about my age, with kind eyes and a warm smile. You must be Maxwell Harrison, she said, extending her hand. I'm Eliza Chen. I'll be running the adult literacy program here. It's nice to meet you, I replied, shaking her hand. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for creating it, she countered. What you've done here, honoring your grandparents this way, it's remarkable. We talked easily throughout the event. and I found myself captivated by her passion for education and community service. When the ceremony ended, I found the courage to ask if she'd like to get coffee sometime. Her smile was answer enough. My parents never signed their acceptance forms, choosing instead to cling to their anger and resentment. I left the door open for reconciliation, but I no longer allowed their choices to dictate my happiness or sense of purpose. Rebecca and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. She completed her teaching credential and began working at an elementary school in a disadvantaged neighborhood. The joy she found in teaching transformed her in ways none of us could have predicted. The foundation grew, providing scholarships to dozens of students each year. I remained involved while continuing my legal practice, now focused exclusively on elder law and protecting vulnerable seniors from exploitation. One evening, as Eliza and I walked through the community garden that had been planted behind the center, I found myself telling her the full story of my grandparents and the trust. "You know what strikes me about this whole journey," she said thoughtfully. "Your grandparents' greatest legacy wasn't their money, or even this foundation." "What was it then?" I asked. "It was you," she said simply. "The values they instilled in you, the person they helped you become. That's how they live on." Her words resonated deeply. In protecting my grandparents' wishes, I had discovered my own purpose. In standing up against exploitation, I had found my voice and my calling. The $3 million estate had never been about the money. It had been about values, about character, about what truly matters in life. My grandparents had taught me that family isn't defined by blood but by love and respect. They had shown me that true wealth lies in what you give, not what you take. As Eliza and I watched the sunset from the garden my grandfather had once tended with such care, I felt a profound sense of peace. The pain of loss and family conflict had transformed into something meaningful and lasting. "They would be so proud of you," Eliza said, softly taking my hand. I squeezed her hand gently. "I hope so." In my heart, I knew they were. Have you ever had to protect something valuable from people who were supposed to be trustworthy? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched you or taught you something valuable, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, sometimes the most important thing we can do is stand up for what's right even when it's difficult. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.